find out that kids in the Bible were sissies. They were really, you know, you could call them grown up, older than what, I mean, like they acted older than they actually were. In today's world, we think of kids, you know, they're just supposed to be this nice little kids that just don't do anything outside of what their parents told them to do, which that's true. But they're also supposed to be strong and, you know, look at the world, see what there is to do. In 2 Kings chapter 5,
a great man with his master, and honorable, because by him the Lord had given deliverance unto Syria. He was also a mighty man in valor, but he was a leper. Naaman was a chief military commander of Syria. Syria was not, a friend of Israel. Syria had, in the couple previous chapters, they had been in war with Israel and Judah. So this was not like they were serious enemies. But this man was like Naaman was. It says he was honorable, but he was a leper. And leprosy begins. Do you know what leprosy is? It begins with small red dots, or this is what it says in history. Because nowadays leprosy can be cured by just simple antibiotics. It's actually not that hard to cure. But back then, leprosy was serious. There was no cure for leprosy. It began by small red dots in the skin, and before long the spots got bigger and started turning white and scaly. It spread through your whole body, and soon your hair started falling out, your fingernails fell off, your toes fell off. It even took, it just ate away at your hands. It was just, everything started, and you didn't have feelings. So it was like one of the worst diseases, and it spread. So if somebody had had leprosy, they had to separate themselves from other people. They couldn't even be around other people because other people didn't want to have leprosy. So this chief military commander, like the general of nowadays, he had leprosy. So he had everything. He was at the top, but he was dying. The Syrian had gone out by companies and had brought away captive out of the land of Israel a little maid, and she waited on Naaman's wife. So this captain's name was Naaman. So the Syrians had gone and they had invaded Israel by small companies, and they had taken a little maid, and she waited on, like a waiter at a restaurant. She worked in their house and stuff, and she waited on Naaman's wife. And she said to her mistress, "Would God my Lord were with the prophet that is in Samaria, for he would recover him from his leprosy." Now, the prophet she was talking about is Elisha, and Elisha had already done miracles in Israel and in Judah. So there was one time when he would go this certain route, and there was this lady that made him come in and eat her bread. Well, then after that, every time he went that route, he stopped in and ate there. Then they were like, well, they're just going to build him a little bed chamber and put a little bed in there with candlestick, with a little table and a little chair, and every time he comes by, he can just stop in there. Well, they didn't have any children, and he asked them, what would you want? And they didn't say, but he knew they would want some children. So he told them that they're going to have a son, and a year later, they had a son. And when he was about, the time old enough to go out to harvest, then he went out, and something happened to his head to where he went back in, and he died that night. So they laid him in the bed chamber, and then the wife went to get Elisha, and he came and he healed him, brought him back to life. So this little girl knew this. Like, imagine, she didn't have to worry about Naaman or anything, but she was caring enough, and thoughtful enough to where she was like, you know what? If the prophet of Israel were here, I'm pretty sure he could heal him. She had to have faith. And she said, "Would God my Lord were with the prophet that is in Samaria." She called Naaman my Lord, for he would recover from his leprosy. And one went in and told his Lord, saying, "Thus and thus saith the maid that is in the land of Israel." And the king of Syria said, Go and I will send a letter unto the king of Israel. And he departed and took with him 10 talents of silver, and 6,000 pieces of gold, and 10 changes of raiment. And he brought the letter to the king of Israel, saying, Now when this letter is come unto thee, behold, I have therewith sent Naaman my servant to thee, that thou mayest recover him of his leprosy. And it came to pass that when the king of Israel had read the letter, he rent his clothes and said, Am I God to kill and to make alive, that this man doth send unto me to recover a man of his leprosy? Wherefore consider, I pray you, and see how he seeketh a quarrel against me. So this 10 talents of silver and 6,000 pieces of gold and 10 changes of raiment, they estimated that nowadays to be worth $1.2 million. So he took a lot of money and stuff. And the king of Israel did not know God. It was Elisha that knew God. So this maiden had just said, I would that the prophet from Israel were here. She didn't define what she meant by that. And they were like, it's probably the king. Of course, the king's the one that knows God. And the king was like, am I God? Can I heal him? You're just trying there to come make a quarrel with me. And he was angry. Send him away. And I think it says that he rent his clothes. Yeah, he rent his clothes. And it was so when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had rent his clothes, that he said to the king, he sent to the king, saying, Wherefore hast thou rent thy clothes? Let him come to me, and he shall know that there is a prophet in Israel. Elisha was like, he's not going to let this guy go back home and say, Israel does not have a God. Israel, can do nothing for me. He was like, there's a prophet in Israel, and send him to me. And so Naaman came with his horses and with his chariot and stood at the door of the house of Elisha. And Elisha sent a messenger unto him, saying, Go and wash in Jordan 7 times, and thy flesh shall come again to thee, and thou shalt be clean. But Naaman was wroth, and went away, saying, Behold, I thought he would surely come out to me, and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, and strike his hand over the place, and recover the leper. Are not Abana and Pharpar, rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? May I not go wash in them and be clean? So he turned and went away in a rage. So Naaman had figured that, Elisha is going to come out of the house and is going to come and say, the name of Jehovah, and cast the leprosy out. And when he didn't do that, he was angry. He didn't, I just wrote down the way Naaman thought God would work was wrong. And after that, he wanted nothing to do with Elisha because it was just because the way he thought. He was thinking wrong. He knew there were better rivers in his own land. But the point wasn't that the water was better. The point was that that's what Elisha told him to do. And verse 13, And his servant came near and spake unto him, saying, and said, My father, if the prophet had bid thee to do some great thing, wouldst thou not have done it? How much rather than when he said to thee, Wash and be clean? So one of Naaman's servants just came into him and said, if he'd have told you to go offer 1,000 sheep, wouldn't you have done it? If he'd have told you to do something great, like fast for 30 days, wouldn't you have done it to get healed of leprosy? Because leprosy, it was killing him. It was taking his limbs and everything. So obviously Naaman was pretty level-headed because he's probably thought about this. He was like, yeah, I probably would have done that. And so, because the next verse it says, Then went he down and dipped himself 7 times in Jordan, according to the saying of the man of God. And his flesh came again like unto the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. He went down to the river and did exactly what Elisha told him to do. What do you think happened? It happened exactly to what Elisha expected it would. He got healed. And verse 15, And he returned to the man of God, he and all his company, and came and stood before him. He said, Behold, I know that there is no God in all the earth but in Israel. Now therefore, I pray thee, take a blessing of thy servant. And he said, As the Lord liveth, before whom I stand, I will receive none. And he urged him to take it, but he refused. So he came and he offered him. Here he had this $1.2 million worth of stuff. And Elisha was like, as long as the Lord lives, I'm not taking anything from you. But he was thankful. Does this remind you of the 10 lepers that Jesus had healed? And only one came back and was thankful. So Naaman was one of those that was thankful. And And Naaman said, Shall there not then, I pray thee, be given to thy servant 2 mills burden of earth? For thy servant will henceforth offer neither burnt offerings nor sacrifices unto other gods, but unto the Lord. In this thing the Lord pardoned thy servant, that when thy master goeth into the house of Rimmon to worship there, and he leaneth on my hand, and I bow myself in the house of Rimmon, when I bow myself in the house of Rimmon, the Lord pardoned thy servant this thing. So he said that when he goes into, it was probably expected he was a government official, so it was probably expected that he, participates in the worship. Because the Syrians had gods that they made with their hands and stuff, so he was probably expected to participate in this worship. And he was like, pardon this, that if I go in that house, I will just worship the God, the Lord Jehovah. I know that there's only one God. And it says that, what did he say? He said, go in peace, and he departed from him in a little ways. So I don't know, did Elisha, was he like, he will let, the Lord convict him or what? Because that still is not a very good idea. But as long as his heart was for the Lord, then it's probably okay. But Gehazi was Elisha's servant, and he had been his servant for a long time. He had been with Gehazi when Gehazi had done miracles before. But Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of God, said, Behold, my master has spared Naaman this Syrian in not receiving at his hand that which he brought. But as the Lord liveth, I will run after him and take somewhat of him. So Gehazi was like, here was their chance to get all this stuff. He didn't even take anything. So he was like, he's going to take his chance. He's going to run after him and see if he can get something. We're going to find out Gehazi was very greedy. So Gehazi followed after Naaman, and Naaman saw him running after him. He lighted down from the chariot to meet him and said, Is all well? And he said, All is well. My master has sent me, saying, Behold, now there be come to me from Mount Ephraim 2 young men of the sons of the prophet. Give them, I pray thee, a talent of silver and 2 changes of garment. So this wasn't near all that he had, but he was like just a little bit of whatever he had. That sounded pretty good. And Naaman said, so he's basically said that there are 2 other men has come to Elisha, and just give them some, a talent of silver, 2 changes of raiment. Gehazi acted like he didn't want anything. Elisha said to give it to the others. And he said, and Naaman said, Be content, take 2 talents. And he urged him, and bound 2 talents of silver in 2 bags, with 2 changes of garment, and laid them upon 2 of his servants, and they bare them before him. So Naaman was like, be content, take 2 talents, not just 1 talent, take 2 talents. Gehazi probably thought he was being blessed by God when he, said, just take 2 talents. And a talent of silver is like, I think it said 120 pounds. So he had 2 servants carry it back to the place where Elisha was. And when he had come to the tower, he took them from their hand and bestowed them in the house. And he let the men go, and they departed. But he went in and stood before his master, and Elisha said unto him, Whence comest thou, Gehazi? And he said, Thy servant went no whither. And so Gehazi denied that he went anywhere. He was like, I didn't go anywhere. And he said unto him, Went not mine heart with thee when the man turned again from his chariot to meet thee? Is it a time to receive money and to receive garments, and olive yards and vineyards and sheep and oxen and men servants and maid servants? The leprosy therefore of Naaman shall cleave unto thee and unto thy seed forever. And he went out from his presence a leper as white as snow. So Naaman came with money and with leprosy, and Gehazi left with money and with leprosy. Was it worth it, do you think? And what was the reason that Naaman even got healed to start with? How did Naaman even know that there was a way to get healed? Yes, from the little maid. All she had said was she had known that there was a prophet that could heal people. And she cared enough to say, I would to God that there was a prophet here from Israel. Now next is, that was a little girl. Her name wasn't even mentioned. But, what?
It was Betty.
Yeah, was it Betty? It might have been the size of Betty. That's called an unwilling missionary. Because she didn't choose to be a missionary like that. But she was captured. She was captive. She could have said, I wish he would die. He's the one that captured me. But instead she was like, I wish he was healed. And now Naaman was serving God. He said, I will not worship any God but the God of Israel. Now in Acts 23, Paul had been preaching in the temple in Jerusalem, and some Jews had stirred up the people against Paul and had tried to kill him. The Roman soldiers came running and they stopped trying to kill him, but the Romans, took him captive, and they took him to the castle. The castle is where the prison was, obviously, because that's where he was kept in prison. And then when they had gone up the stairs into the castle, he turned and told his story to the people. And they even wanted to kill him even more. The next day, they loosed his bands and took him to the council. And Paul stirred up because they let Paul go and let him down and reason with the Pharisees and the Sadducees and stuff. And Paul turned the Sadducees against the Pharisees. Because the Sadducees didn't believe that anybody rose from the dead. So he said something about, I'm called in question about the resurrection. Then the Sadducees and the Pharisees were angry at each other, and it says that the soldiers captured Paul again because they were afraid they would tear him apart. And they took him back to the castle. Well, in 23:11, it says, the night following, the Lord stood by him and said, Be of good cheer, Paul, for as thou hast testified of me in Jerusalem, so must thou also bear witness in Rome. So must thou bear witness also at Rome. So God told him that the same way you testified of me, just that day before he had testified of him in Jerusalem. He said, the same way you're going to testify of me in Rome. When it was a day, certain of the Jews banded together and bound themselves under a curse, saying that they would neither eat nor drink till they had killed Paul. And there were more than 40 which had made this conspiracy. So there were like 40 men that had bound themselves under a curse, where they said that they will not eat a bite or drink anything until they had killed Paul. They were serious about killing Paul. So what would happen if they wouldn't kill Paul? How long do you think they'd last? How long can you last without water? You can last 40 days at least without food, but how long can you last without water? And they came to the chief priests and elders and said, We have bound ourselves under a great curse, and we will eat nothing until we have slain Paul. Now therefore, ye with the council signify to the chief captain that he bring him down unto you tomorrow, as though you would inquire of something more perfectly concerning him. And we, or ever he come near, are ready to kill him. So they told the Pharisees and stuff, go ask the captain, the Romans that guarded Paul, and tell them that we want to talk to Paul. They probably were like, they might, they wanted to discuss something with Paul and acted like they might want to make peace, that they have been considering what Paul said, and they might want to make peace with him and have everything good. So it would have sounded good. But they were going to kill him. Like when he was bringing him down, they were going to kill Paul. When Paul's sister's son heard of their lying in wait, he went and entered into the castle and told Paul. And we're going to find out later, this was just a small boy. He overheard them talking about how they want to get Paul out of the castle and they want to kill him. And so he went into the castle by the Roman soldiers, and he went into Paul and told Paul what they wanted to do. And Paul called one of the centurions unto him and said, Bring this young man unto the chief captain, for he hath a certain thing to tell him. So he took them and brought him to the chief captain and said, Paul the prisoner hath called me unto him, and prayed me to bring this young man unto thee, who hath something to say unto thee. So this soldier took him to the chief captain, which would have been, the main soldier, the soldier that was over all the other soldiers there in the castle, and said that this young boy has something to tell him. So the chief captain took him by the hand. How big boy is it when you took him by the hand? It's got to be a small boy. And went with him aside privately and asked him, What is it that thou hast to tell me? And he said, The Jews have agreed to desire thee that thou shouldest bring down Paul tomorrow into the council, as though they would inquire somewhat of him more perfectly. But do not yield unto them, for there lie in wait for him more than 40 men, which have bound themselves with an oath, that they will neither eat nor drink till they have killed him. Now are they ready, looking for a promise from thee. So the chief captain then let the young man depart, and charged him, See thou tell no man that thou hast shewed these things unto me. So he was like, he knew if the young boy would, if he would tell other people what he had seen, these 40 men might get angry and kill this, boy. They might take vengeance on this boy. And he called unto him 2 centurions, saying, Make ready 200 soldiers to go to Caesarea, and horsemen 70, and spearmen 200 at the 3rd hour of the night, and provide them beasts that they may set Paul on, and bring him safe unto Felix the governor. So he said 200 soldiers, and horsemen, 70 horsemen, and 200 spearmen at the 3rd hour of the night. So this would have been about midnight. So it was like they were serious. How many people would that be? That's almost 500 people, 500 soldiers to guard Paul at midnight. Now, see, do you think this was God's will for Paul to get out of there without them killing him? How did God get him out of there without killing him? Because the Jews were going to kill him. God made sure that there was a young boy there to overhear them talking, overhear them making this conspiracy. And if that young boy wouldn't have told him, then they would have probably let Paul go down there and they would have killed Paul. But God told him that you're going to speak in Rome yet. So he had to make sure that Paul was protected. And that's what happened. This young boy had the courage and the boldness to go in there and tell this Paul and tell the soldiers. So children play a big role too. You might see these 2 children were not even, their names weren't even mentioned in the Bible. But they were just faithful. They were just messengers. That's all they were. They didn't do anything huge and miraculous, but they were messengers. They knew something and they shared what they knew. And that's what you should do. You should, if you know something, you don't know that there's somebody here that can heal somebody, but you know that your parents are far more joyful than they were at one point, aren't you? Why is that reason? If you would get captured into a faraway land, what could you do? Could you see if there was somebody, over you that was just sad and down? Could you say that, I know somebody that could make you joyful? I know, it's called Jesus. So just be servants, be willing for whatever it is that, wherever you are.